The year was 1884, and the mountain village of Greystone sat hidden among cliffs and forests, so remote that few travelers ever found their way there. To the outsider, it seemed quiet, even picturesque. Smoke rising gently from stone chimneys, the smell of bread and burning pinewood lingering in the air, the steady sound of the river cutting through the valley. But beneath that calm surface, the people of Greystone carried a secret older than memory, a ritual that came due once in every generation. The day of the festival had arrived. The bells rang, not church bells, but a hollow iron chime that echoed across the valley in a rhythm older than Christianity. Children dressed in woven garlands sang as they marched through the streets, their voices high and sweet, but their eyes cast downward, as if even their joy had been rehearsed and forced. Women lined the windows of timber-framed houses, watching in silence, while men hammered long poles into the earth, raising banners marked with strange runes that no one could read anymore. To an outsider, it looked like celebration. To the villagers themselves, it felt like dread covered in ribbons. Every 30 years, the festival of the bride returned. They said it had always been so, passed down from ancestors who settled the valley when the land was wild and unforgiving. The people claimed it brought prosperity, full harvests, healthy livestock, winters that spared them the worst of the cold. But every prosperity demanded a price, and tonight, that price would once again be paid. By late afternoon, the square had been transformed. A raised wooden platform stood at its center, decorated with flowers that wilted almost as soon as they touched the wood. Lanterns were lit early, though the sun had not yet set, filling the streets with a flickering orange glow. A hush fell over the crowd, broken only by the mournful notes of a violin playing a tune older than anyone alive. At the far end of the square, the elders appeared, men and women whose faces seemed carved from stone, their eyes carrying the weight of too many festivals. They walked slowly, deliberately, as though each step pressed deeper into the earth. Behind them followed a group of girls, dressed in plain brown smocks, their faces pale with anticipation and fear. One of them would be chosen. One would be crowned bride of the village. The villagers clapped, but the sound was strained, unnatural, more like thunder forced from empty clouds. The children stopped singing. Dogs barked, then fell silent, tails between their legs. Even the river, so constant in its sound, seemed to slow its rush. In that moment, as the fading light turned the valley crimson, the festival began in earnest. To outsiders, it would have looked like a wedding day. To the people of Greystone, it was something far older, far darker, and far more binding than any marriage. The bride would be chosen before midnight, and by dawn, she would no longer belong to herself. Her name was Ilara. 16 years old, slight of frame, with hair the color of raven feathers, and eyes that caught the last light of dusk like glass. She had no family left, not since the winter fever of '82 carried away her parents and her younger brother within a single week. For 2 years she had lived under the care of the villagers, moving from home to home, fed by charity, clothed by what others could spare. Some pitied her, some barely acknowledged her, but all spoke the same words behind her back. She has no one. She is meant for it. And so, when the festival arrived, there was little surprise when the elder's gaze fell upon her. The crowd parted as the high elder, a withered woman named Maren, lifted a hand and pointed. The air seemed to tighten, the wind itself halting between breaths. All eyes followed that crooked finger until it settled on Ilara, standing with the other girls, her hands clasped nervously in front of her. "Ilara Whitcomb," Maren said, her voice like brittle parchment. "The land has chosen." There was no cheering, no relief. Instead, the villagers bowed their heads, some whispering blessings, others refusing to look at her at all. A mother clutched her daughter's shoulders protectively, as if afraid she too might be taken by mistake. Ilara's knees threatened to buckle, but the girls beside her gently stepped away, leaving her alone in the center. Her heart hammered, and though she tried to breathe, it felt as though the air itself pressed against her chest. This was supposed to be an honor, the elders always said. Yet every story she had ever heard about the past brides ended not in joy, but in silence. No one spoke of them afterward. No one even dared remember their names. 2 women stepped forward to dress her. They led her through the murmuring crowd, away from the platform and into a small stone chamber near the churchyard. There they removed her simple smock and placed upon her a gown of white linen, though its hem was stained, as if it had been worn many times before. A crown of wildflowers was placed upon her head, their petals already wilting. Her hands were bound with red cord, not tightly, but enough to remind her she could not run. One of the women whispered as she adjusted the gown, her voice shaking, "I am sorry, child. We all are." Ilara tried to ask what would happen to her, but the woman turned away, eyes glistening with tears she refused to let fall. When Ilara was led back outside, the villagers gasped softly. She looked every bit the part, pale, fragile, radiant against the darkening sky. But in her own chest, terror gnawed, sharp and relentless. She felt not like a bride, but like an offering laid at the foot of an altar no one dared question. As the violin played its mournful song, Ilara stepped onto the platform. The festival of the bride had claimed her, and there was no turning back. Night fell quickly over Greystone, as though the sun itself wished to turn away from what was about to unfold. The lanterns strung across the square flickered weakly in the wind, their flames straining against the darkness that crept between the houses. Ilara stood upon the wooden platform, her wrists still bound with red cord. The violin had gone silent. In its place came a low, rhythmic chant, first from the elders, then from the rest of the villagers, until the entire square pulsed with a single droning voice. The words were ancient, syllables twisted and guttural, nothing she understood. They rose and fell like waves crashing against a cliff, relentless, swallowing her in their rhythm. Two men approached, their faces hidden beneath masks carved from birchwood. Each mask bore the same hollow expression, eyes cut wide, mouths stretched in silent screams. They took her gently but firmly by the arms and led her down from the platform, across the square to the ceremonial house, a building that stood apart from the rest of the village, its windows boarded, its door heavy and blackened with age. No one lived there, no one entered it except on the night of the festival. The closer they came, the more the air seemed to thicken. The chants grew louder, the villagers circling them like a tide, their shadows twisting in the lantern light. Ilara tried to steady her breathing, but the red cord seemed to tighten against her skin as though alive. At the threshold, the High Elder Meren raised her hands. The crowd fell silent at once. Only the crackle of torches filled the air. "Tonight," Meren intoned, her voice carrying like a bell across the valley, "we honor the covenant. Tonight, we bind flesh to soil, blood to stone, breath to air. So the land shall feed us, protect us, and claim what it is owed." Her words pressed against Ilara's chest like a weight. Flesh, blues, breath. The meaning was clear, even if the form was not. The masked men guided her into the house. Inside, the air was stale, heavy with the scent of dust, damp wood, and something metallic, something like iron. The door shut behind her with a sound like thunder. The room was bare, save for a single chair at its center, carved from black oak, its arms etched with spirals that twisted endlessly, never ending, never beginning. Candles burned around it, their flames steady, though no window admitted wind. On the walls hung remnants of past festivals, scraps of faded gowns, crowns of brittle flowers, and cords stained darker than time should allow. They seated her in the chair. The cord was unwound from her wrists, only to be replaced by new bindings, thicker, rougher, fastening her arms and legs to the wood. Her breath quickened, but she forced herself not to cry, not to scream. The chants outside resumed, louder than ever. But now, within the chamber, another sound stirred. A whisper. Low, curling, slithering between the cracks of the wood. It was not human, and it was calling her name. The chamber was silent except for the murmuring outside, the steady thrum of voices that rose and fell like the heartbeat of the village itself. Yet Ilara heard something else within the ceremonial house, something the chants seemed almost meant to disguise. It was faint at first, a hushed echo, no louder than a breath. She thought it was the creak of the wood or the flicker of the candles. But as the moments dragged on, the sound sharpened, resolved, until it carried her name with impossible clarity. Ilara. Her skin prickled. She pulled at the bindings, the rough cord burning her wrists, but the chair held her fast. Ilara. This time it was closer, right at her ear. She turned her head sharply, but there was no one, only the black oak chair and the silent room pressing in on her. Then the whispers multiplied. Not one voice, but dozens, maybe hundreds, weaving around her in a terrible harmony. They spoke in broken fragments, as though many throats tried to form one thought. We see you. We waited. You are ours. Her heart pounded so hard it hurt. She squeezed her eyes shut, telling herself it was her imagination, a trick of fear. But when she opened them again, the shadows on the walls had shifted. They no longer stretched with the flicker of the candles, but bent toward her, stretching long fingers across the floor as though reaching. The air grew colder. Each breath stung her lungs like icy water. She could see it now, the mist of her breath rising in the dark, and within it, shapes. Faces half-formed, dissolving as quickly as they appeared. Some wept. Others smiled with cracked, too-wide grins. The whispers rose louder, pressing against her skull. Bride of the village, bound in blood. You belong to us. A sob escaped her throat before she could swallow it down. She tried to speak, to demand who they were, but her voice cracked into nothing. The only reply was laughter. Not cruel, but worse. Affectionate, eager, like a parent coaxing a child closer. Then came the touch. A cold pressure grazed her arm, light as silk. She flinched, straining against the cords, but the pressure returned, crawling slowly from her wrist to her shoulder. Another brushed across her cheek, another tangled in her hair. Invisible hands stroking, claiming, welcoming her as though she had stepped into a family that had been waiting for her return. She wanted to scream. She wanted to tear herself free. But the voices grew sharper, echoing all at once, and the candles guttered as though bowing to them. Do not fight. You are not the first. You will not be the last. In the instant the words formed, Ilara realized the truth. The walls of this place were not silent. They were alive. They remembered. And within their memory lived the voices of every bride who had come before her. And now they whispered. She was one of them. The whispers had not stopped, but they shifted, becoming softer, almost mournful, as if the unseen presences recognized her terror and sought to soothe her. Ilara shook her head violently, refusing to listen. Yet no matter how hard she tried to block them out, the voices pressed on, trickling into her mind like water through stone. Then, silence. Sudden and absolute. The air grew heavier, thicker, as though the room itself were inhaling. From the far corner of the chamber came a sound, faint at first, then louder, the scrape of wood against stone, the dragging of feet too frail to lift themselves. Ilara froze. From the shadows stepped a figure. At first she thought it was another trick of the flickering candlelight, a phantom born of fear. But the figure solidified as it drew closer. A woman, stooped and withered, her white gown yellowed with age, her crown of flowers long decayed into brittle twigs. Her eyes, sunken and rimmed with shadow, fixed on Ilara with piercing intensity. She looked less like a ghost and more like something caught between life and death, clinging desperately to both. "Ilara," the woman rasped, her voice cracked like dry earth. "They chose you." Ilara tried to speak, but her tongue stuck to the roof of her mouth. The woman moved closer, her bare feet dragging across the floor, leaving faint smears behind, dark stains that seemed too fresh for one so old. "I was the bride," the woman continued, "before you, before them. They told me it was honor. They told me it was blessing." Her lips trembled, curling into a grimace that might have been laughter or grief. But it was neither. Ilara's throat finally loosened. "What? What is this? What do they want?" The woman leaned close. The smell of damp earth clung to her, thick and suffocating. Her breath rattled as she whispered, "Not marriage, not love, sacrifice. We are bound to the spirit of this land, the soil, the stone, the river. Our lives are the price for their survival. You will feed it, as I have, as all the others before us have." Elara shook her head wildly. "No, I won't. I'll escape." "There is no escape." The woman's eyes gleamed, wet with something that might have been pity. "The land keeps what it is owed. The forest will turn you back. The mountains will swallow you whole. Even death cannot free you. Look at me, child. Do I look like one who has died?" Elara's stomach twisted. The truth was undeniable. The woman was no longer alive, yet not truly gone. A prisoner, suspended between worlds, forever. The figure reached out with a trembling hand and brushed Elara's bound wrist. Her touch was ice, but it burned like fire. "Resist if you wish. Scream, fight, pray. It changes nothing. By dawn you will be bound. By dawn you will belong not to yourself, not to them, but to it." The candles guttered, and the woman faded back into the shadows, her last words lingering like smoke. "The bride of the village never leaves, not alive, not dead." The chamber door creaked open, spilling a thin shaft of torchlight across the floor. The chants outside ceased instantly, as though the entire village had been holding its breath. 2 masked men entered, flanking Elder Maren, who stepped carefully into the room, her staff tapping against the stone. Her eyes, pale and cloudy with age, locked on Elara's trembling form. For a moment, she simply studied the bound girl, her expression unreadable. Then she spoke, her voice low, almost tender. "You have seen her, haven't you?" Elara's breath caught. She didn't need to ask who. The image of the withered woman lingered too vividly in her mind. She nodded. Maren sighed, the sound hollow. "Good. Then you begin to understand." She lifted her staff and drew a circle in the dust around the chair, murmuring words that rattled like dry bones. The masked men placed small bowls at the circle's edge, one filled with soil, one with river water, one with blood. The iron tang filled the air as the last bowl was set down. Maren's gaze softened, though her tone remained firm. "This land is cruel, Elara. You were not alive when the fever came, nor when the famine stripped the fields to nothing but ash. But I was. I watched children starve, mothers bury babes still red with birth. Men hang themselves rather than see their families waste away. The land demanded balance, and our ancestors found a way." She gestured to the bowls. "Every 30 years, one life, one bride, is bound to the spirit of this place. Her soul feeds the soil, her breath fills the air, her blood strengthens the stone. In return we are spared. The river runs clear, the harvests flourish, the village endures." Elara shook her head violently, tears cutting hot lines down her face. You can't sacrifice people for crops. That's not survival, that's murder." Maren's lips pressed into a thin line. "Child, it is not murder if the land itself commands it. We do what we must. Would you prefer hundreds die, as they once did, instead of one?" Her words sliced like a knife. Elara wanted to scream at her, to curse the village, to denounce their cowardice, but deep down she heard the whispering chorus again, echoing what the elder said. "One for all, one for all." "You've made this choice for me," Elara spat, her voice trembling but fierce. "You speak of honor, but you choose the weak, the unwanted, the forgotten. That is not honor. That is cruelty." For the first time, Maren's eyes flickered, as though the words struck a hidden wound. But she did not falter. "It is the way. It has always been the way. And when you are gone, the people will give thanks. They will live, and your name will join the others in silence." She tapped her staff once, and the masked men tightened Elara's bindings. The circle was complete. The ritual could not be undone. As the door closed again, Elara realized the full weight of it. The pact was not just with the spirit, it was with the entire village. Every smiling face she had known, every hand that once offered her bread, every kind word whispered in her lonely childhood, all of them had already condemned her. The night deepened, heavy as stone. The chants outside grew louder, rolling in waves that rattled the shutters of the ceremonial house. Elara's body trembled against the bindings, every muscle taut, her breath sharp and shallow. She thought her fear could grow no greater until the change began. It started as a warmth beneath her skin, a creeping heat that spread from her wrists where the cords bit deepest. She thought it was the burn of the rope, but the sensation grew, swelling up her arms, across her chest, until it felt as though fire threaded her veins. She cried out, but her voice was swallowed by the endless chorus outside. The candles flickered wildly. Their flames leaned toward her, bowing, as though drawn to something rising within. When she looked down, her breath caught in horror. Marks were appearing across her skin, faint at first, then darkening into intricate spirals, curling symbols that mirrored the carvings on the black oak chair. They pulsed faintly, as though alive, glowing with the rhythm of her heartbeat. "No," she whispered, tugging frantically at her bindings. The marks spread faster with every breath, climbing her neck, winding across her collarbone, etching themselves like firebrands into her flesh. Then came the voices. Not whispers now, but full, clear, overwhelming. Welcome. She takes the shape. She becomes the vessel. Her head throbbed as though her skull were splitting open to make room for them. Images flooded her mind. Fields ripening with golden grain, rivers swelling with fish, flocks thick in the sky. But each vision was drenched in red, as though every blessing demanded blood beneath it. The heat inside her shifted, turning cold, unbearable. She gasped as her breath fogged the air, her fingers numbing though fire still crawled along her skin. It was as if the land itself were being poured into her, filling her hollow, writing her from within. Outside, the villagers erupted into cheers. For them, this was proof the covenant was working. They could not see the terror twisting her face, nor the tears streaking down her cheeks. They only heard the chants synchronizing with her ragged breathing, and they rejoiced. Ilara's vision blurred. The room spun, the symbols on the walls shimmering as if alive. For a moment she thought she saw the faces of past brides again, their eyes hollow, their mouths open in silent screams. Some reached out, but instead of pulling her free, they pushed her deeper. Her body convulsed, her back arching painfully against the chair. She felt as if she were being hollowed out, piece by piece, until nothing of Ilara remained. And then, stillness. The whispers quieted. The marks on her skin glowed faintly, then dimmed, settling into her flesh as though they had always been there. Her heart slowed. She could still feel herself, but not entirely. Something else moved inside her now, cold and vast, stretching its roots through every part of her being. Ilara understood with sudden clarity. She was no longer only herself. She was the bride of the village. She was the spirit's vessel, and the transformation had only begun. The room had gone still, yet the fire inside her veins refused to quiet. Ilara sat bound to the black oak chair, the spirals glowing faintly on her skin, the whispers pressing like cold fingers against the edges of her mind. She felt the presence rooting deeper, threading itself into her lungs, her heartbeat, her thoughts. "Yield," the voices murmured. "You are chosen. You are ours." But something in her, some ember that the ritual had not smothered, sparked. She thought of her mother's hands braiding her hair before the fever took her. She thought of her brother's laugh, quick and bright like bells. She thought of the nights she had gone hungry while the village looked away, muttering she'll be the one. Her terror hardened into defiance. "No," she hissed. "I don't belong to you." The voices stuttered, as if startled. The candles guttered low. For the first time, silence pressed against the chamber walls. With a strength she didn't know she had, Ilara twisted against the cords. The rough fibers dug into her flesh, blood welling where they cut, but she kept pulling, biting down on the pain. Her wrists burned, her shoulders screamed, but at last one hand slipped free, slick with blood. The whispers rose in fury. "No, she breaks the bond." The floor trembled, dust sifting down from the beams overhead. The black oak chair shuddered beneath her as though it were alive, desperate to hold her in place. She tore at the cords binding her other hand, then her legs. The instant she was free, she staggered to her feet. Her body felt weak, drained by the ritual, but something stronger than exhaustion drove her forward. She stumbled to the door, shoved it open, and fled into the night. The square lay empty. The villagers had retreated to the outer circle, their chants echoing from the hills. For a moment, the absence of their eyes felt like freedom. She darted across the square, her bare feet slapping against the dirt, and sprinted toward the forest beyond the houses. The trees loomed tall and black, their branches clawing at the moon. She plunged into the woods, branches tearing at her gown, thorns raking her skin. She didn't care. Every step was a prayer, every ragged breath a rebellion against the fate they had written for her. But the land itself shifted against her. Paths that should have led downhill twisted back upward. Fallen logs barred her way where none had been. The river she knew flowed west now, cut east, its waters rushing with a voice that echoed the whispers. "You cannot leave," the voices boomed, no longer soft but thunderous. "You are bound. You are the bride. You are the land." Elara stumbled, fell to her knees and clawed at the earth beneath her. The soil felt warm, pulsing faintly, as though it were breathing. Roots coiled around her fingers like serpents, tightening, pulling her down. She screamed into the night, a sound swallowed by the endless forest. For one heartbeat she believed she had broken free. But the land was alive, and it wanted her back. The forest held her in its jaws. Roots tightened around her wrists and ankles, dragging her deeper into the soil. The earth swallowed her cries, muffling them until they were nothing but shallow echoes beneath the trees. She thrashed, clawing at the ground, but every movement only seemed to hasten her descent. Above her, the moon glared pale and merciless through the canopy. It was not a beacon of freedom anymore. It was an eye, watching, judging, complicit in the ritual she had dared to resist. The villagers emerged from the tree line, their faces half lit by torchfire, their eyes wide and fever-bright. They had followed her trail of blood through the woods, their chants swelling louder with each step. "She runs, but the land does not let her," the elder intoned, raising his hands. "She defies, but the pact cannot be broken. The bride is bound." Elara's chest heaved as she struggled against the soil sucking her down. Her fingernails split, tearing as she raked against the roots. She spat blood and screamed, "I am not yours! I will never be yours!" But the words only made them laugh, a hollow, joyless sound that blended with the rustle of the forest itself. The ground beneath her pulsed, and something vast stirred. The whispers that had been thin, and many became one. A single voice, deep and ancient, rolled through her mind like thunder breaking stone. "You are mine, not theirs, not yours. Mine." The villagers fell to their knees, pressing their foreheads into the dirt, as if the voice had struck them blind. The torches flickered wildly, then extinguished, leaving only the spectral glow of the moon. Elara's body arched against the earth's grip. She felt her veins blaze with a fire not her own. Her vision blurred. She saw not just the forest, but the village beyond it, the fields, the mountains. All of it pulsed in time with her heart. Every tree, every stone, every drop of water in the river carried the same rhythm. She realized with horror the land was alive, and it was using her as its vessel. The roots tightened around her chest, winding like ribs, crushing the air from her lungs. She gasped, choking, as the voice whispered again, "Through you, I am fed. Through you, they are bound. You are not bride. You are soil, blood, seed." The villagers rose in unison, their chants returning, desperate and frantic. Their voices did not plead with her. They pleaded with what lived inside her now. Their faith was not in Elara the girl, but in the thing that claimed her. Her last act of defiance was a ragged cry, not of surrender but rage. It tore through the clearing, high and sharp, before the roots closed around her mouth, silencing her. The earth shuddered. Then slowly, it stilled. When the villagers approached, they found no trace of her, but a hollow in the ground, damp with blood, filled with black soil that steamed faintly under the moonlight. The bride had been taken, the pact renewed, and the land was satisfied. The following dawn broke quietly, as though the night's horrors had never occurred. Mist clung to the roofs of the cottages, and dew glittered on the fields. The villagers emerged from their homes with bowed heads, silent and reverent, as if each knew without being told that the pact had been sealed once more. There was no sign of Ilara in the square, no whisper of her rebellion. The hollow in the forest where the earth had swallowed her steamed faintly, releasing a scent of iron and ash. Some claimed they could hear her voice still, faint and muffled beneath the soil, a sob or a scream, or perhaps a curse. By midday, the village carried on with its life. The smith returned to his forge. The women hung their laundry. The children played near the river, though none dared venture toward the forest. Yet something had changed, subtle and dreadful. The crops, withered for weeks, began to rise straighter, greener. The cows gave milk once more. The river ran clear after months of silt. The people nodded solemnly, grateful, though none spoke of Ilara aloud. She was gone, not as a person, but as an offering. The bride had been given, and the land had answered. But in the quiet corners, in hushed tones, mothers clutched their daughters tighter. They knew the cycle would turn again. The soil would hunger, the pact would stir, and another girl would be chosen when the whispers rose once more. That night, the elder led the village in prayer around the fire. His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed something else. Fear. Even he had heard her final cry in the woods, a sound unlike the others before her. Hers was not just a scream of terror. It was defiance, a seed planted in the soil itself. And as the flames flickered, the villagers swore the shadows swayed differently. A woman's silhouette, tall and broken, wavered at the edge of the light. Some said it was only smoke. Others whispered it was Ilara, not gone, but watching. Seasons passed. The harvests grew strong, the winters mild. The village thrived, bound as ever to its silent bargain. Yet strange things began to occur. Babies were born with birthmarks shaped like spirals. Roots burst suddenly through cottage floors. At night, when the wind blew from the forest, it carried a woman's laugh, low, bitter, and mocking. By the 20th year, when another bride was chosen, unease trembled through the crowd. As the girl was bound, she stared at the elder and whispered, "She's still here. She's waiting." The elder paled. He said nothing. The land had its due. But deep beneath the soil, in roots that pulsed like veins, something new stirred. Ilara's rage had not been buried. It had taken root, spreading quietly through the ground, a second pact forged not with the villagers, but against them. And one night, when the moon was full again, the land would no longer be satisfied with just a bride. It would take the village entire,